Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Series 10 episode Oxygen, written by Jamie Matheson and is directed by Charlie Palmer, who had previously directed episodes way back in Series 3 of Doctor Who. I believe he did Smith and Jones and the Shakespeare Code. I could be wrong, off by memory. So I was really looking forward to this, and I liked the premise of it. I liked the premise of it, the idea of a much more science accurate space adventure of sorts, as well as certain other details which we will get onto later on in the episode. But the main focus of this story, which something I was hesitant into going into this, was essentially it is a zombie story. Zombies are actually something which Doctor Who surprisingly haven't done a lot of. The closest you could say is the mummies, which turned out to be robots later on in the Pyramids of Mars. So that's unique. But at the point when this was airing, The Walking Dead was at its height. There were loads of zombie movies and TV series, comic books, everywhere. There was a saturation, there was a craving for zombie franchise, and it seemed like Doctor Who, like with the return of Dr. Mysterio with superheroes, was trying to cash in on that motif of that kind of genre of storytelling. So that out of the way, there's nothing really much going into this behind the scenes or out of the scenes. But yeah, so let's get into the story. We actually start off with the Doctor, Bill, and Nardole essentially talking. Oh wait, we get a pre-credit sequence where we see somebody get murdered in a very, very atmospheric way. You see these bodies floating around, and the Doctor gives a speech, which is actually a reference to Star Trek: The Next Generation and the original series, where he says "Space, the final frontier," and then he goes into a description on how everything in space just wants to kill you, just absolutely wants to murder and devour you. Absolutely love it. It really sets the tone and the atmosphere and the soundscape where they're on the outside and you can just hear the boots. There's no really atmospheric sounds, giving an atmosphere to the space of it all. And we see this character who she is talking to this guy and talking about, like, oh, if we survive this, I just want to say I want to have a baby with you. I'll tell you that as soon as I can get this radio to work, our communication system to work. It turns out that guy can't hear her, only for her then to be killed by by these zombies in space chasing after this one character who we see later on in the episode, but we never learn how he survived. Very strange, very odd. But then we go back to the Doctor, who's working at the Bristol University as a lecturer talking about space, and we get a funny moment. It's like, what's this got to do with the particular subject? It's like, I have no idea, but space is fun, isn't it? This leads into the story where the Doctor basically promises to take Bill into space, into a space adventure. And Nardole, who hasn't been a proper character, who hasn't been a main figurehead since the episode The Pilot, and even still his role is significantly small there. The Doctor essentially takes Bill and Nardole on this adventure, meaning that Nardole is now an official companion. And Matt Lucas does a great job here. Pearl Mackie does a great job here. Peter Capaldi absolutely owns it. I have stated in multiple videos prior to this that Series 10, 12th Doctor, is completely different to Series 8 and Series 9 in that he combines both of elements of those two versions of his portrayal, nails it into a much more streamlined version of the both, into a way which it feels like the definitive 12th Doctor. And I think one of the reasons why it hits so hard, so well here, is that you've got that kind of quirky, energetic, adventurous mode of Series 9, 12th Doctor. But here that 8th Doctor persona hits in. And I kind of also, as well, in this episode, it kind of clicked on what made Series 8, 12th Doctor not click as much as Series 10. For you see, they both have this idea of being quickly annoyed and quickly agitated by stupid people around them. However, in Series 8, usually it's just people making common sense questions, and the Doctor's just annoyed that people are just asking away. But here, you can clearly see there's this disconnect between him and Nardole, and you can clearly see that from his point of view, he clearly sees Nardole as a sort of lesser. He sees him as a friend, but he also sees him as a nuisance. So that atmosphere, that personality targeted towards him feels justified. Maybe not right, it's still it's right in the sense of character rather than an attitude that you should take on towards people. This feels very 12th Doctor-y, if that makes a lot of sense. As opposed, in Series 8, where the Doctor seems to be grouchy and grumpy at people for seemingly no reason. But here, the dynamic of the three really hits home. Now, we get into the world of this. Basically, they land on a small mining spacecraft, and we get introduced to these other characters later on in the episode who they're not that important, they're not that interesting, they're just sort of the survivors of the crew. And that's something which I do feel like the Bristol subplot in these Series 10 episodes do kind of factor in on some of the weaknesses of the series, because it means that we have even less time to develop the main story proper, with these characters who get introduced in this story having nothing really focused on them. But the world building here, where we essentially learn that there's this now organization that runs essentially space, capitalism in space, where instead of currency in terms of money and stuff, you have breaths. You basically pay for oxygen, and you have a certain amount of breaths. And there's these great systems where it's you basically pay for a certain, and instead of counting stuff in minutes, in seconds, you count them in breaths, which actually makes a lot of sense. As Nardole explains in the episode at one point, you can't just say how long it is in seconds. You got to say it in breaths, because if you're speeding up your breath, you breathe quicker, so you have less time. That's a very interesting fact, and you can see that Bill quickly panics very quickly, and she also, as well, her suit has some malfunctioning issues. And what this story, I think, does really well here is the development of our three characters. I think this story is mainly, if you enjoy the story for the 3 episodes, that's for these 3 main characters, you're going to have a hell of a blast time here. Nardole is the comic relief of the characters, of the 3, though Bill is also a comic relief-ish fun character in a similar way as Donna before her. But Bill is he has these strange and reaction. There's a great bit where he recognizes the woman who does the voice for the suit system, and it's oh yeah, I used to date her. She left me at one point for something. And there's just these strange reactions. Also, the way he interacts with the Doctor on a much more scientific level, not much more of an interest in what they're doing. Nardole is the first one to really be let's get back in the TARDIS, let's get back to Bristol, and let's protect the vault. We need to protect the vault. The vault is the most important thing. Doctor, you promised me to promise you to keep yourself on Earth to do the vault. As the Doctor gets kind of sick and kind of bored with that attitude. He knows that he needs to, but he also knows that that love, that thirst for adventure is something which, and later on in this episode, will bite him in the ass, but it's something that makes the Doctor the definitive Doctor throughout all of his incarnations. And it's just, and that is all then held up with Bill, who isn't the scientific one. She doesn't know much about the science and logistics of the science of space. However, she brings this loving personality, this eager for an adventure, for the chance to chase in. She does get scared at some points, to the points where she does also considers going back into the TARDIS, but she's also the first one to get convinced by the Doctor that they should stay and help these space people, these these astronauts to conquer these zombified entities. We quickly learn throughout the episode that the suits are actually seem to be the ones in control. The reason they look dead is that, they're dead and they're just along for the ride. They destroy the nervous system with a system inside the suits that basically says destroy all livestock, all organic components. I think organic components, that's basically it. And the crew have some theories whether this is a hack of a system, whether they're pirates, whether there's a malfunction. And the Doctor doesn't, nothing seems to be really clicking with the Doctor on these theories. But they get chased around by these by the suits, essentially, in some really great action scenes. One in particularly is memorable. And it's funny because it's not actually an action scene. Essentially, Bill's suit is automatic, so she can't really control it herself. And what happens is, there's a malfunction on the helmet when they plan to basically go out into the vacuum of space. They do have these air shields over them, but however, that's not going to be strong enough, so they need to wear these helmets. But the system realizes that the helmet is faulty, so the suit actually disconnects the helmet away, and nobody can basically do anything about it. And Bill then gets, for a split second, exposed to the vacuum of space. And there's this great bit where basically she remembers the Doctor's speech at the start of the episode, and it's like, right, don't hold your breath, otherwise you will explode and you will die. So you gotta try, whatever you do, you may not want to, but you gotta kind of keep breathing, like you're breathing underwater, essentially. And the Bill kind of starts blackening out, and she kind of gets these vague imagery of them being chased by these suits, and she's the Doctor without the helmet on in the vacuum of space, leading her towards the next point they need in the system, because they need to get to Station 12, which isn't actually on the mapping system, as it's a new area in the space station. So they're for the moment they're safe there because the systems on the suit don't actually have that yet in their databanks. Logically, that makes a lot of sense. It's really cool. I really like that. But what happens is there's a bit moment when Bill wakes up and the character's like, the Doctor made it out, he survived, they basically explain, and I like how it's up to Nardole then to basically break the news to Bill that he paid consequences for his actions of taking off his helmet to basically save Bill in regards to and basically hacking the system so that he could basically lead Bill away from the danger, away from the other suits. And essentially what happens is it's actually destroyed the Doctor's retinas. The Doctor, throughout the episode of this episode, is blind. And this basically, we've never seen the Doctor this vulnerable. We've never seen the Doctor blind before. He kind of does joke about it, but you do get the feeling that this might have been a permanent adduction to his retinas. And that's just such a fascinating, realistic, we never see any consequences for anything like this. It's a small action beat, but it has ramifications which will affect the Doctor throughout the rest of the adventure. But the Doctor does kind of get more cold and calculated, especially when essentially the suits can kind of overhear and they learn about Station 12 and they get it into their system so they can go into Station 12, and essentially they have to abandon Bill, and Bill they cut off Bill's nervous system, and she's basically dead. And the Doctor comes up with this massive plan. The plan will save them by essentially killing them quicker, connecting their suits to the engine of this space station. And he basically goes on to explain that nothing's gone wrong with the suits. Nobody's been hacking them. Nothing has been defaulting them. The suits are doing exactly what they're programmed for doing. Because the thing they're fighting for the most, they're fighting against, is capitalism. Politics and Doctor Who. It works. It so works. It's so effective here. And the Doctor gives this brilliant speech about how they're basically fighting an algorithm, and it's the endpoint of capitalism, where human life means nothing on the system, so they need to be eradicated because they're just slowing down the production of it. If the entire system was just run by suits, then they could do things a lot better in a lot more cheap and efficient way. We see that in our own real life world, where loads of workers around the world are getting replaced by robots, leaving less and less job opportunities for humans, and leaving basically humans in the gutter. And Doctor Who is using this kind of medium of this idea of now for an idea of the future, which we can kind of see the ramifications of that, and we can learn from this story how to exist at in the real world. It's a great concept. It's something which I don't think is particularly new here. It's an idea in sci-fi which has happened a lot, but for Doctor Who, this story handles it very well, and James Matheson really earns some props from tackling this this topic, this political theme, with not only care and spice, shall we say, with those speeches, just how the Doctor just absolutely hates the concept of capitalism, and also as well that they're fighting in its algorithm, but also doing it in an environment which has some very realistic world laws to the universe, shall we say, with space acting much more like how we know space to be scientifically, and it just makes this world feel really grounded, feels really real in this, and the Doctor then basically reveals that Bill isn't dead. The system just like knocked her out essentially really hard, as they took her nervous system away from her, but because it was such a short period of time, and also she wasn't just sucked into the vacuum of space at this point, she basically survived it. And essentially what he's done is he's connected these suits to the engine, so if they die, the engine dies, and the capitalism system basically goes, okay, your lives are more important now alive than you are dead, because if you die, you will cost us so much money in the capitalist system, where the engines will destroy this entire station, destroy all the things that they're mining. And that's kind of sad and depressing, and the Doctor seemingly gets his eye restored in this story at the end of it, and he takes them back to the surviving characters, back into the head office, shall we say. The Doctor then later on in his Bristol office basically explains like how months later there's a revolution between the workers and the higher up companies, and then that's the end of capitalism, only to find something stupid to fight over with humanity. And Bill then leaves the room, only for then to nod or to hit in the point that, this was very dangerous. You could have died, you could have really been seriously injured, and then the vault, wherever that's important for the vault to be protected, would be gone, and that the person inside it, who might even sense the Doctor is vulnerable at this point, could take advantage of that. Only the Doctor to reveal a shocking twist, which the story ends on a cliffhanger, in which the Doctor reveals he is still blind. He can't see a thing. What? That's a great way of ending it. I don't like the way it's shot. I don't like that zoom and then it cuts to black and then it's like, I'm still blind. It did kind of come off a bit cartoonish, especially compared to the rest of the episode. However, I still really like it. And that is Oxygen. Overall, a fantastic episode. Sure, the side characters are dull and uninteresting. There's this really strange one where the only thing I can think of is that they make like racist jokes. Like, not like a racist joke at a character, but essentially one character's blue, and it's like there's this prejudice towards blue people in the future, and Bill, like, who hasn't seen a blue person before, is kind of like taken back by it. And not only that, in this future, nobody understands why she would also feel prejudiced at some point in her life, and she's just like in awe of this. And there's also Bill points out like he's got friends that are bluish. But apart from that, I can't really name extra about the side characters. I feel like the side characters and some of the locations being very bit dull I mean, a space station, especially a space station like this, is something that we've seen 100 times before. However, it's made up by our main three cast, Matt Lucas, Pearl Mackie, and Peter Capaldi, absolutely giving their A game here, as well as Jamie Matheson's scripts between the three of them and the whole political angle this story takes, as well as the more realistic environments and world building here, really shows it. And also Charlie Palmer's directing, especially in some of those space scenes, absolutely gorgeous. So I think Oxygen is a really great story, probably one of my favourites in series 10 of Doctor Who. So anyway, that is Oxygen. So join me next time where we will be saying goodbye to our class as we basically end up with the rest of the finale of the series. So join me next time for The Lost. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.